This is Monday, September the 15th, and this is a reproduction of Bible Prophecy class number 14, The Gospel in the Stars. The original production was corrupted. In a review of our last lesson, we're going over the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur. That holy day we have determined to be a rehearsal of the work of the Lord when He returns and balances the books, so to speak, regarding the remaining Jewish people who are here on the earth, those who survived the tribulation. Their life was saved by virtue of the atonement of the shedding of the blood of a great many people. And the Revelation account says that the blood will flow up to the camel's hock or the horse's bridle for a distance of 200 miles. So that was the second holy day of the fall season, or the harvest. We have now completed 6 of the Jewish holy days. We know that they are rehearsals, they are appointed times, and in some cases they are memorials of appointed times that have occurred already. We know that the planting season holy days were fulfilled at the first coming of the Messiah. He was the Passover lamb who was slaughtered on the Passover for the sins of the world. He was buried on unleavened bread. He arose on first fruits, as the first fruits of the resurrection. On Pentecost or Shavuot, the Holy Spirit came down, dwelt among men, and the betrothal of the church occurred. Christ has now returned, fulfilling that part of the Jewish tradition of the betrothal, where he is left to go to prepare a place for his bride, and he will someday soon return. That return, we believe, will occur upon some near-term Rosh Hashanah, the meaning of Rosh Hashanah being that time in which the last trump of Judaism is blown. As recorded in 1 Corinthians 15, 51, and 52, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all die, but we shall all be saved. We shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the sound of the last trump. So, with Rosh Hashanah being the rehearsal of the appointed time of the rapture of the church, the next event in the redemption work of the Lord is Yom Kippur, in which his feet set down upon the Mount of Olives when he returns, and then he goes about to balance the books and to shed the blood of others for the remainder of Israel, which is left on the earth. We are about to move into the holy day of Sukkot, but before we do Sukkot, we want to get a background in the Gospel in the Stars. So now let's proceed with the rest of the story. The rest of the story concerns Judah and Tamar. Judah, as you'll recall, is the progenitor of all of the Jews. And he was a man who had an illicit relationship with the daughter of his betrothed, named Tamar. And from that relationship there were born twin boys, Perez and Zerah. From Perez, Jesus was eventually born, from the Perez branch of Judah. There's another branch of Judah called Zerah. And Zerah had 5 sons, Ethan, Heman, Chalcol, and Dardanus, or Dara. The first 3, Ethan, Heman, Zinri, had no progeny, but Chalcol and Dardanus did. The question is, what happened to Chalcol and Dardanus? According to the Harmsworth Encyclopedia, Cecrops, or Chalcol, who was the brother of Dara, was the founder of Athens and its first king, and he was thought to have been brought there as the leader of a band of Hebrew colonists who left Egypt before the Exodus. And the descendants of Dara, or Darda, or Dardanes, or Dardans, was the founder and ruler of ancient Troy. And he ruled there and his descendants for several hundred years until it was destroyed in the famous siege of Troy. Aeneas, the last of the royal blood, collected the remnants of his nation and traveled with them to Italy, where he married the daughter of Latinus, the king of the Latins, and subsequently founded the great Roman Empire. And so now we know the rest of the story regarding Dardanus and Chalco. Now the question is, what comes to your mind when you hear these following words? Zodiac, Gemini, Aquarius, and Virgo. Well, probably the last thing that comes upon your mind is that these are terms which remind us of the plan of redemption of the Lord. It's probably the last thing that comes to your mind. Most people would say these are events or names that one would associate with astrology. And so now the question is, what is the difference between astrology and astronomy? Well, astrology is the belief that assumes and attempts to interpret the influence of the heavenly bodies on human affairs. And astronomy is the science which deals with the origin and evolution, composition, and all general elements associated with the heavenly bodies that are scattered throughout the universe. So one is a science and the other is a belief system. The next question is, what is the oldest book in the Bible? And the answer is probably Job. And there's evidence that exists that Job was the Jobab of Genesis 10:29. And if so, that puts Job being written somewhere around 2,000 years BC. So the question is, where was the gospel story before Job? Or was there a gospel story before Job? To answer that question, let's go to Genesis 1:14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years." The Hebrew word signs is othoth, and it's a root of oath, which means someone or something to come. It is prophetic. Seasons, the Hebrew word for seasons is moed, and it means an appointed time. It's the exact same word that is used for the Jewish holy days. They are appointed times and times of rehearsal. Now, Adam named all the animals, but God reserved to himself the responsibility for naming the stars. In Isaiah 40:26 we read, "Lift up your eyes on high, and behold who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number, and he calleth them by their names, and by the greatness of his might. For that he is strong in power, not one faileth." And then in Psalms it reads, "And he determines the numbers of the stars and gives them all their names." So we know that God is the one who named the stars. Now, a woman by the name of Miss Frances Rowlandston of Keswick, Cumbria, United Kingdom, in 1862, she was doing research for a book she was writing on the Mazzaroth, the Mazzaroth being the Hebrew word for the zodiac. And she had assembled a mass of information from many Middle Eastern cultures, and including China. And it was regarding how the ancients named their stars and where they got it from. And from this work, it became apparent that all cultures had the same names for all the constellation and for most of the stars. And from this raw data, E.W. Bullinger wrote his book, The Witness of the Stars. And the data proved that the star names had an ancient common source, and we believe that ancient common source to be God himself. And so with that raw data, Bullinger wrote his book. Now the Mazzaroth is spoken of in the scriptures, and so are some of the signs of the zodiac. Reading in Job, it says, "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion?" Both of these are star systems within constellations. "And canst thou bring forth the Mazzaroth, which is the zodiac, in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sun?" And Arcturus was one of the stars in the foot of one of the decans of Virgo. And the word, of course, Mazzaroth, means zodiac. This is a picture of the zodiac. And from this zodiac, you can see that there are 12 signs scattered about the path of the orbit of the Earth around the sun, so that every month a different sign shows up in the night sky. There's a little known fact about the veil of the temple as recorded by Josephus in his Wars of the Jews. The temple veil was basically a fabric that was over 4 inches thick. And this is what Josephus says about it. He says, "Before the doors there was a veil of equal largeness with the doors, and it was made of it was a Babylonian curtain embroidered with blue, fine linen, scarlet, purple, and of a contexture that was truly wonderful. Nor was this mixture of colors without mystical interpretation, but it was kind of an image of the universe. For the scarlet seemed to be enigmatically signified fire, fine flax the earth, the blue the air, the purple the sea, and the two of them having their colors the foundation of this resemblance. But the fine flax and the purple have their own origin for that foundation, and the earth producing the one, and the sea the other. This curtain had also embroidered upon it all that was mystical in the universe, excepting that of the 12 signs representing the living creatures." Basically, Josephus is telling us that the veil of the temple had embroidered upon it the signs of the zodiac. And continuing on with that, it says, "And when any person entered into the temple, its floor received them. This part of the temple, therefore, was in height 60 cubits, and its length the same, whereas the breadth was but 20 cubits. But it was still that 60 cubits in length, and was divided again, and the first part was cut off at 40 cubits, and had 3 things that were very wonderful and famous among all mankind: the candlestick, the table of showbread, the altar of incense. Now the 7 lamps signified the 7 planets, for so there were springing out of the candlesticks. Now the 12 loaves that were upon the table signified the circle of the zodiac and the year, but the altar of incense by its 13 kinds of sweet-smelling spices with which the sea replenished it signified that God is the possessor of all things, and that both in the inhabitable and habitable parts of the earth, and that they are all to be dedicated to his use." In 1928, a Jewish synagogue was uncovered in Israel, and in the floor of that synagogue was a beautiful mosaic of a zodiac. This is a close-up shot of that mosaic, and you can see that that mosaic was a carefully inlaid picture of all of the signs of the zodiac. Now, Josephus, in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews, wrote about Seth, one of the sons of Adam. And it says, "Now this Seth, when he was brought up, and came to those years in which he could discern what was good, became virtuous, and he himself was of excellent character, so he did leave children behind him who imitated his virtues. And these all proved to be of good disposition, and they lived and inhabited the country without dissension, and in a happy condition, without any misfortunes falling upon them till they died. They were also inventors of a particular wisdom which concerned the heavenly bodies and their order, and that their inventions might not be lost before they were sufficiently known upon Adam's prediction that the world would be destroyed at one time by force of fire and another by violence and quantity of water, they made 2 pillars, one of brick and the other of stone, that should the one pillar of brick be destroyed by the flood, or of stone might remain, and exhibit those discoveries to mankind, and to inform them that there was another pillar of brick erected by them. Now this remains in the land of Syria to this day. The remains in the land of Syriad to this day are literally the pillar of stone. The land of Syriad is Egypt, and many believe that that pillar is the Great Pyramid for a variety of reasons, which we'll go through at some time. Now, Josephus continues to report that the posterity of Seth continued to esteem God as Lord of the universe and to have entire regard for virtue for 7 generations. But in the process of time, they were perverted and forsook the practices of their forefathers and did not pay these honors to God which were appointed to them, nor had they any concern to do justice towards men. So after 7 generations, mankind perverted these things that were given to Adam, I believe, through Seth. And I believe this is where we have the fork in the road, where astrology came in and perverted that original plan, that original mechanism that God gave man to show the gospel story in the stars. Now, the Greek word for zodiac has an ancient root which means a way or a course. And if the zodiac is a course, then where does it start and where does it end? We find that answer in another one of the monuments in Egypt, the Sphinx. And on the plain of Giza, near the Great Pyramid, there is a strange ancient stone monument of what appears to be a hybrid beast with the head of a man and the body of a lion. This is called the Sphinx. The meaning of the Sphinx has long been debated, but its true meaning can be found in the zodiac in the portico of the Egyptian temple at Isna. Between the sign of Virgo and the sign of Leo is an image of the Sphinx. The word Sphinx literally means to bind closely together. The Sphinx tells us that the zodiac is a story that begins with the head of Virgo and ends with the body or the tail of Leo, the lion. So the Sphinx is a mechanism which gives us the beginning and the end of the zodiac story. Now, this is another picture of the zodiac, and you can see where Leo and Virgo are. And so we know that whatever the story is, it begins with Virgo. And so let's go to Virgo and we'll see what we can discern from that sign of the zodiac. As you've heard me say, the zodiac is composed of 12 primary signs. The signs are organized such that during the nighttime of each earthly month, a new sign is featured in the night sky. And each of the 12 signs have 3 supporting signs called decans, from the word we use for decks of a ship. So each sign is literally 4 signs. So the first sign is the sign of Virgo. This is a picture of Virgo, and we see Virgo is the picture of a woman. In her right hand, she's carrying a branch, and in her left hand, she is carrying a spica of wheat. Now, the ancient name of Virgo in Hebrew is Bethula, which means the virgin. The Arabic name for this sign is the branch. The Egyptian sign is Espolia, which means the seed, and the brightest star in the Virgo has a name in Hebrew which is called Shemek, which means the branch. And the other star names are Sebula, which means who carries, and Al-Azal, the branch, and Subulon, the spike of corn. From Virgo, we understand that this is a virgin woman. In her hand is a branch. One of the names of the Messiah is the branch. Another name for the Messiah can be found in the first prophecy in the scripture, in which the prophecy of the seed of the woman bruising the head of the seed of the serpent, and the seed of the serpent bruising the heel of the seed of the woman. So the seed of the woman is, or the seed of Virgo, is another reference to the Messiah. Now this story is reinforced by the first decan of Virgo, called Coma the Child. in this decan, we have a picture of of Virgo, the woman, sitting in a chair, and in her lap is Coma, the child. Coma in Hebrew means the desired or longed for. The Egyptians called this decan Sheshnu, which means the desired sun. And there are no ancient star names for this particular decan. But we have some words from an Arabian astronomer, Albumazer, in the 8th century, who, by the way, was not a Christian, had no issue to support or deny. And he reports that there is in the first decan, as the Persians, Chaldeans, Egyptians, Hermes, and Asclepius teach, a young woman whose Persian name denotes a pure virgin sitting on a throne, nourishing an infant boy having the Hebrew name Ehuzu, with the significance of Isa, which Greek is called Christos. So in this decan, we have the child, we have a woman, a virgin with a child. The child in Greek is called Christos, or Christ. We have the Christ child being born of the Virgin. The second decan of Virgo is Centaurus, which is the centaur. And you can see a picture of the centaur with a shield on his left arm and a spear in his right. Appears to be galloping across the heavens. The Hebrew name for Centaurus is Bazi, which means, and in Arabic, Al-Bazi, it means the despised. The Greeks called the brightest star in Centaurus Chiron, a word in Hebrew root that means the pierced. The Persian astronomer Ulugh Beg called that star Ptolemy, which means the heretofore and the hereafter. Another name for this constellation in Hebrew is Azimuth, which means this offering. And from this decan, we can get more information about what is being talked about here. We have a double-natured being, a being half man, half divine, who is despised, who was pierced, who was the heretofore and hereafter, and at some point the sin offering. All elements which we immediately associate with the Messiah, or Christ, or Yeshua HaMashiach. Now, the reason I spoke to you about the descendants of Chalco being the source of where the Greeks got all of their information, and so the Greek mythology has its roots in Judah, who has his roots in the Hebrew and all the way back to Adam. So the belief system of the Greeks has some credibility as being from Adam. And the Greeks had a myth regarding Chiron the centaur. And Chiron was renowned for his skill in hunting, medicine, music, athletics, and prophecy, and all the most distinguished heroes of Greece are described as being his pupils. Although he went about doing good, he was despised and rejected of men, and eventually laid down his life so that others might live. He was supposed to be immortal, but in a conflict with a wild boar, an arrow from heaven, not intended for him, wounded him, and though he was immortal, Chiron agreed to die and transferred his immortality to Prometheus, whereupon the great god placed him among the stars. Here we have a story of Christ told as a centaur. So no doubt the gospel story has been about and around in Greek mythology for a long time. And Greek mythology and Jewish mythology have a common source. The third decan of Virgo is Bootes. And Bootes is a picture of a man running with a sickle in one hand and a spear in the other. He's coming to reap, to harvest, and apparently to wage war. Bootes in its Hebrew root means the coming. In Job 9:9, he is called Arcturus from the star in his left knee, meaning he cometh. The Egyptians called him Shamat, which means one who rules, subdues, and governs. The star in his spearhead is named Al-Kutrops, which means the branch, treading underfoot. The star just below his waist is called Merak, which means the preserver, guardian. So now we have more evidence that these star systems are reporting the nature of the coming of the Messiah, the one who comes to rule, to govern, who treads underfoot, and then he has the additional duties of preserving or guarding someone. The star in his left calf is called Mufridi, which means one who separates. And when he comes, he is going to separate wheat from chaff. And the star in the spearhead called Nekar, means the pierced. And of course, we know that Messiah was pierced. And the other name for the star in Hebrew is called Murja, which means who bruises, obviously referring to the fact that he is going to bruise the head of the seed of the serpent. Now here's the message of the gospel and the stars that I would like for everyone to take from this session, and that is the stars are named by God. They were designated as appointed times. The Jews considered the zodiac a device from God and kept it in their synagogues, and it was on the veil of the temple. The plan of redemption can be found in the zodiac and its associated star names. The sign of Virgo is just one of 12 stars. Each of these star systems give us another story of the work of redemption of the Messiah. The original message of the zodiac was perverted 7 generations after Seth. That was right at the flood. And so that was another reason why God wiped out mankind. And it's now in our generation that we are recovering this information. And we have it now in our possession. And we know that the original meaning of the zodiac was literally the gospel written in the stars. This will conclude this session, and we'll begin next week with the holy day of Sukkot.